Today we are interviewing Sharon Lee. Hello and welcome, Sharon. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thanks. Thanks for interviewing me. I'm Sharon Lee, and I'm the Executive Director of Low Income Housing Institute, or LEHI for short, and we're a nonprofit housing organization.
Fantastic. So, Sharon, working with the Low Income Housing Institute has probably given you many opportunities to work with the homeless community. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience?
Well, yes, we are a nonprofit organization. We've been around since 1991, and we own and manage over 2,300 apartments, affordable, and we do permanent supportive housing. We serve people who are 30% of the area median income or below. So we have a lot of housing that reaches people with no income, people on disability, people who are struggling to live on minimum wage. So in addition to our housing, which we own and manage, we have 3 urban rest stops, which are hygiene centers for homeless people. So they're located in downtown Seattle by the University of Washington, as well as the Ballard neighborhood. And these are facilities that are fully staffed, that provide free restroom, showers, laundry for homeless individuals who are living unsheltered. We have a lot of homeless people who are working, who need to stay clean and presentable. So we offer this public service. In addition, a few years ago, we started developing tiny house villages because it became very clear that it took too long to develop multifamily housing, even though we continue to keep up our pace on developing permanent supportive housing and low-income housing. In the meantime, in the Seattle area, there's over 5,000 unsheltered homeless individuals. So we said, this is untenable. So why not give people something better than a tent on a platform?
I think that's amazing. Here in Indianapolis, we don't have anything like that. And part of my goal with this video blog is to raise awareness about what's going on around the country with different services that are available to the homeless, as well as the tiny home villages. And I know that you have several out west, including in Oregon, in Washington. Can you tell me a little bit more about the tiny homes and why you find that those are a viable solution? I mean, I know homelessness is a very complex issue and that there are a lot of different solutions. Why are tiny homes one solution?
Well, we have about 13. We have 13 tiny houses. Actually, some are, still underway. So we have 13 tiny houses. The majority are in Seattle. And then we have one in Tacoma, just south of here, and then 2 in Olympia. And some of them are very small. The smallest is 14 tiny houses with common facilities, a kitchen, a shower, bathrooms, and that one is being sponsored by a church. So we work with churches, we work with the public sector, we work with private owners to develop these villages. And then the largest village has about 48 tiny houses, and it's serving 60 people. And each village has its own management plan and service plan. So we have one village which is homeless women only. And then some villages have families with children as well as singles and couples. And other villages are adults and couples, and all of them allow pets, and all of them, allow partners and um, people who, have a safe place to keep their belongings. So each tiny house is 8 feet by 12 feet, the size of a small bedroom, and they're all insulated, and they have locking doors, they have windows, they're furnished, and they have heat and electricity. And then what we typically have is we have a kitchen, um, with refrigerator, freezer, appliances, and then we also have plumbed showers and toilets and laundry. And then most importantly, we have case managers that are on site that work with the residents to move them into housing, employment, services, and education. And then each village has a fence, and there is a security pavilion, and then there's also a emergency exit, and then there's communal space, and of course there's a smoking pavilion someplace on site. So it's a whole community. It's not just a tiny house by itself, but it's a whole community with a very strict code of conduct and expectations in terms of people have to agree to nonviolence. People agree to follow the code of conduct, and what's really great is that people help each other, and there are chores. There are weekly chores, and then there are weekly, except for the pandemic, there were weekly mandatory community meetings.
So you mentioned that there are 13 different villages across Washington. What is the oldest village? Like, when was the first one built?
Okay, the first one was on 22nd and Union with the Lutheran Church of the Good Shepherd, and that is our smallest one. And that one is still operating today. It's about 5 years old, 4 or 5 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
since then, the city of Seattle has been a tremendous partner. So the current mayor, she helped set up 4 villages, and then the previous mayor, was very supportive as well. And so the city has been a wonderful. We're on city land, so we're on city-owned property, and the city has partnered with us in terms of helping set up the villages and also providing operating funds.
that's amazing. I commend the mayor and your city council representatives for making that commitment to the homeless.
Well, I will say this, because we have such a crisis here around homelessness, we have the 3rd largest homeless population of any major city. So
Mhm.
we're right behind New York and LA, and then it's Seattle. And it became clear that allowing tents, like even tent cities, was not something that the elected officials or even the neighbors were very happy about.
Mhm.
And so we now have a lot of support from our neighbors, and of course from city council and the mayor, because the tiny house villages are very attractive. They're cute. They're good looking. They're good. The villagers are good neighbors, and we have a community advisory committee for every village.
Mhm.
So each community advisory committee has business leaders, the Chamber of Commerce, the neighborhood community council, a church group, some direct neighbors. And now, once people get over, some of the initial fear, people are now bringing donations. They're being very supportive. They become champions for the residents and for the villages. I'll give you a really good example. of how this happened, and it's maybe something you could try. But we went to the building department, the head of the building department, about 4 years ago, and we asked her, well, we just can't have people live in tents, especially in Seattle. It's so cold and it gets wet, and the wind really makes it impossible to stay dry because people keep putting on tarps after tarps,
Mm-hmm.
and they still their belongings, and they just get wet and stay cold. What can we do? What would you allow us to do with the building code? And she told us, look, if you agree to build tiny houses that are under 120 square feet, we will allow you to do that,
Hmm.
because 120 square feet is, according to the International Building Code, anything 120 square feet could be considered a dwelling unit. So if you're under 120 square feet, then you know you're 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 not covered by the IBC. So that's why all the tiny houses are under 120 square feet. And then, of course, when we build out the shower and toilets, and when we install electricity, that's all. Um, we always get a permit, and so we have a licensed plumber and a licensed electrician, and then that part gets inspected. So we are, it's a great model. So we have other communities that are trying to, do something similar, and I think it's extremely workable. So the city has been extremely what's called, data driven. They want to make sure that, okay, is this a model that we want to replicate? Let's check it out. And they compared our numbers in terms of what's considered success. They compared our numbers to a overnight shelter where people are, in a church basement or sleeping on mats on the floor. And then they also compared us to what's considered a enhanced shelter, a 24/7 shelter, where let's say people are, there. It could be congregate or dormitory. And they found out that we were much more successful at moving people into long-term housing, permanent housing. And, so our numbers are proven out that we're the preferred, not only do homeless people who are living on the streets prefer to have a tiny house, but the data, the what's called HMIS, the Homeless Information Management System, is showing that our performance were way beyond what the other shelters are doing.
That's incredible. Congratulations. I know from my research, everything that you're saying is true among other cities. The tiny home communities are just a great transition for helping to continue to provide those wraparound services and transition those homeless individuals off of the street and into housing, but into a community where they are with like-minded individuals and they are working together to improve their situation. And then because of that, they are more successful when they do go into permanent housing because they've had that transition time to get used to going from street life to house life.
Well, absolutely. So we're serving a very large population of people who are chronically homeless. We've moved in people who haven't felt heat. They haven't had heat for like 6 years. And when we bring them the heater and show them the tiny house, they start crying. They've never had a place on their own. They've never had that level of privacy and security. We have this like wonderful video on the positive impact for homeless women living in tiny houses. We'd love to share that with you. And then the other thing about the tiny houses is that they're so easy to build. We have hundreds and hundreds of volunteers. We'll put a Facebook post out there, and then we'll have like 100 people show up and help us build the tiny houses on site. And then we also have people who are building the tiny houses in their backyard, and then we pick them up. We have like, middle school students, high school students, businesses, friends who get together and work on a tiny house. So it's been fabulous. Each tiny house costs only 2,500 in materials. So we have a package that will list out what dimension of lumber do you need, how many of this, and then sort of the blueprint, and then we're able to get lots of donations of tiny houses, and then we even have paint parties where we'll get people in the neighborhood and artists and everybody, and they'll spend a weekend and decorate the tiny houses, and we have like fabulous artwork on the doors and the sides of the tiny houses.
That's incredible. So only 2,500. That's really a great margin. That's even with the plumbing and all of the additional heating and air and all of that.
Oh, that's for the tiny houses.
Okay.
And if you obviously, it depending on where you're located, obviously the cost of the kitchen, the community kitchen, the bathrooms, the showers, those would be additional. But the tiny house itself is 2,500.
Okay, so your tiny houses do not have kitchen facilities inside of the tiny house, is that correct? Or bathroom?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But they do have
So
heaters.
it's sort of like the old family camp where your family would live in the lean-to, and then you would go to a community kitchen, and then you would have shared bathrooms and showers. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I've definitely seen that, and that is something that we have been talking about for our tiny home community is doing something similar to that. Yes, definitely having a community kitchen, but there's been some discussion around having a little kitchenette, a little private bathroom, just with a sink and a toilet in the tiny homes. So I wasn't sure if yours had any of that or not.
No, we're because we're under the building code.
Yeah.
If we increase our square footage, we could do that. And we are right now working on a cottage plan. So we have a cottage plan that recently got funded, and the city is giving us land for $1 a year for
Wow.
the next 30, 60 years. And then we're working on putting together the cottages, so that will be up and running later. So it's 22 cottages with a common house on city-owned property, and those cottages will be fully contained. So we'll have a kitchen, bathroom, and living space.
So you mentioned a little bit about the success that you're finding with these tiny homes compared to shelters and that kind of thing. I know that there's also been a lot of discussion around the how much better the tiny homes are for this COVID-19 epidemic or pandemic that we are experiencing right now, because there can be social distancing with the tiny homes, whereas in shelters, you're not able to social distance. And I believe I saw something that you wrote recently that touched on this topic. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yes, the city and county and state are spending tens of thousands and hundreds of dollars putting people who are currently in shelters into hotels or into giant like warehouses or buildings because of COVID-19. They're trying to de-intensify everybody who's currently living in a shelter, because so many people are sleeping inches away from other people. And so the shelters are not a good place because of the proximity. Everyone's breathing the same air. Everyone is too close. So it's easy to spread contagious diseases like COVID-19. So what has happened is that all of a sudden, people who are critical of us realize that, gee, the tiny houses, you don't have to de-intensify people in a tiny house, because they're already 6 feet apart from each other. There's 2 walls and a locked door separating you from the next person, and you're breathing your own air. And when you step outside your tiny house, you're breathing, you know, fresh air, right?
Right.
And so we just got everyone in the tiny house villages tested for COVID COVID-19, and nobody has been found to be infected. In the meantime, there's about 112 people who are now living in the traditional shelters who have been tested and found to be infected. That's not to say that we won't have cases. We may have cases because, not everybody is necessary. You don't know, right? You don't know who's following the stay-at-home rules that the governor has put out. But in terms of social distancing, physical distancing, the tiny houses are so much better during the pandemic than someone, living with 50 other people in a group shelter.
Hmm. Yeah, and I know I have heard it mentioned that housing is healthcare, even before the pandemic, just talking about how we spend so much money on emergency care and just healthcare in general for the homeless, especially the chronically homeless individuals, because of the unsanitary and isolation type of situation. I know that's not a word, but because they're not isolated and they are in shelter types of communities, and being able to have housing does provide a level of health care for the homeless. Um, do you find that to be true?
Well, we think it's very dangerous to put. I mean, everybody thinks like, oh, we have all these homeless people on the street. Why don't we just put up one gigantic tent, or put them in one big warehouse, or put them in the lobby of um, one big public building? And I think that has contributed to um, people who already have health problems. They may be frail. They're suffering from like exposure and poor health from living outdoors for so many years, and they do have compromised immune system, and that's why people are very worried. Like right now in California, the spread of actually here too, the spread of hepatitis A. In California, there was even spread of typhus. Like people haven't seen typhus for a gazillion years, right? And then now it's the coronavirus and TB as well. So we think it's inexpensive, and it makes more sense to put people in tiny houses than to create all. And by the way, if you try to set up a new shelter, can you imagine how much it costs to get the permits for a new shelter, and how long it would take to build it, right? Whereas
Right.
tiny houses, you just need we can set up a tiny house village in 3 weeks, and that's what we did. The city of Tacoma said to us, look, there's all these people right now camping out in a public park. We need to, the council took a vote. We have to clear this park out, right? Would Lehigh be willing to set up a tiny house village on this vacant piece of land? And could you do it in 3 weeks? And we did it. We mobilized and set up a tiny house village in 3 weeks. And this can be done all over the place because there's vacant land. Well, maybe there's some urban areas, there's not a lot of vacant land, but there's vacant land that's temporarily vacant. It's not long-term vacant. So we can set up a tiny house village. It's fine if it can be there for 2-3 years. So they're built, all the tiny houses are built on skids, 4x4 skids. So a flatbed truck can just come and pick them up. And we've moved, let's see, 2 villages already, from one location to the other location. And it's not that hard. And so it really, it really makes a lot of sense in terms of community relations, in terms of engaging people. We have so many people who want to help out. They're tired of what can we do they want to do something to end homelessness for people, right? And one way you can help is to help build a tiny house, help paint a tiny house, um, and and that will help end someone's homelessness because a tiny house is a real bridge to long-term housing.
Yes, I know. In the about 12 months that I've been working to establish Tiny Act of Kindness, tiny homes for the homeless, and just doing some outreach and uh, really education of the community in general about what is happening around the country with these tiny home villages. I get so much positive response and support. People just want to help, and they love the idea of something so simple helping a complex issue. And I just commend you for what you've done out there. And I really hope and pray that we will be talking with you in another 6 to 12 months, telling you about our success stories. Thank you
Oh,
so.
that'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be terrific. Yeah, I'm happy to get you the press release. The press release has the new village we opened is on church-owned property, and it's a historic African American church. And the target population of that village, which is called TC Spirit Village, is focused on Native Americans, Alaska Natives, and African Americans, the populations that are um, severely underrepresented in the homeless system, but who are, overrepresented in terms of people who are homeless.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so fantastic. I just am so encouraged to hear what you're doing and all of the people that you're helping and all the success that you're having. I wish you continued success and would love to know if you had anything else that you would like to add that I haven't asked about.
No, this is fine. This is great. And then we'll send you the information. And if you could send us how to connect with your Facebook Village collaboration group, that'll be great.
Yes, I would be happy to send
We
that.
have we have we have a lot of resources. We have management plans, service plans, code of conduct, site plans. We're happy to share this. We really encourage other communities to do the same thing.
Thank you, Sharon. I would love to have, yes, as much as support as you're happy to provide, we will accept it very graciously.
Oh, and then I don't know if you saw the news yesterday, but the city of San Jose, the mayor came and visited, and he is now committing to develop 500 tiny houses in response to COVID-19 in San Jose.
Wow, that's fantastic. I had not heard that.
Yeah, that would even top us. We have like 400 tiny houses. So our 400 tiny houses are helping about 1,000 unsheltered individuals per year. So we're really making a dent in terms of the what people were considered unsheltered, and now they're living in a tiny house. They're now considered sheltered under the continuum of care, and according to HUD.
And one other
Yeah.
question I have about that, this is a temporary solution, right? So they go into a tiny house, and then is there a time limit or a time frame that they typically spend in the tiny house before they go to a permanent housing situation?
Well, it varies greatly. Families with children who come, our case managers try to move them out into housing, long-term housing, as quickly as possible. So it really depends. The coordinate entry has been very difficult to get people into permanent supportive housing. So we have some people who move in a few weeks. We have some people who are staying like 4 or 5 months. So right now we don't have in terms of us being harm reduction, we have a harm reduction model. We are not forcing people that they have to be out at a certain time. But we are seeing like high rates of success for people, like we help them fill out multiple housing applications. And so waiting for housing in a tiny house village is probably like the best option for them.
Yeah.
And then we have a lot of people who eventually get Section 8 and eventually, we help them find nonprofit owned housing or even, below market rate housing.
And your case managers is that they are yours, or do you work with, do you collaborate with other organizations, or how does that work?
We have one or two case managers that's our employees at every site, and they do a lot of housing navigation as well as get people on, public assistance, but also the employment. Um, you know, so many people got jobs just because they were able to, shower and, you know, keep their belongings and not worry about their belongings during the day. So they were able to go to work. We have one partner, which is providing behavioral health, and that's at two villages where we are targeting people with mental illness and chemical dependency.
And that's interesting that you bring that up, because I know that when I am out talking and educating people about this concept of tiny home villages, one subject that comes up a lot is the biases that people have about homeless, and how most homeless have addictions or a mental health issue. And in my experience in working with homeless, it's not the norm. I mean, it happens and it is out there, but there are many, many paths to homelessness.
Right, absolutely. We saw families who their landlord decided not to accept their Section 8, so they became homeless. We have a woman who became pregnant, and she was told that she was living in a single room occupancy unit, and she had to leave. And so she and her son, her infant son, and a dog were living in the woods, and then we moved them into a tiny house. And now she has a 2-bedroom apartment and with Section 8. So we have lots of success stories, and because we also own and manage a lot of housing, we prioritize people who are living in tiny houses into our own housing.